I'm CK, and tonight we're going to be building and taking a look at a Quad Pingable LFO from 4MS out of Portland. A good LFO is always important to have, and this is a 4X LFO, which will be neat, and we'll see how it goes together. Hope you enjoy the video. So here's the box. Quad Pingable LFO from 4mscompany.com. I haven't looked at their website yet, so I don't know anything about them. I believe this is the front panel for it. I purchased the kit from thonk.co.uk, as I buy many of my eurorack things from. They're very reliable. So let's open this up first. Yeah, so this is the front panel for it. It's got 4 LFOs, a ping jack, output, ping, output, ping, output, ping, output. Then the skew, reset. I assume those are going to be push buttons, I'm not sure. And I'm going to bet these are switches, but I'm not sure. So we'll see how this works. First we'll figure out how you can get the kit out of the takeout food container it's packed in. Okay, down to the bits and pieces. Eurorack power cable, of course. Here is bill of materials. Let's take a look at that first. It's got a bunch of little caps, bunch of resistors. So the build guide is not there. I'm sure it's online. I don't know if we'll actually even need it. The circuit board will tell us that it's scored, so it's snappable in half. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to do that right now. There we go. Now we've got it. And it'll all fit behind. And I'm looking, and first off, the circuit board quality is good. All through hole plating. Diode markings are very clear. All the component spots appear to have their values on them. So you could put this together without the build guide. I don't know if there's any tuning or adjustment you need to make on this, which would of course require a build guide or something. I don't know. I will look on their website after we go through the parts and find that out. So let's see what we've got in the bag for the rest of the parts. Oh wait, it's got a build guide. Look at this. This is cute. And they do have a calibration process and test process here. So it looks like a very comprehensive build guide. That's nice. And here we go. LEDs identified on the paper, because you can't tell the color directly from the LED, or I'm sorry, you can, but it's not easy to do that necessarily. Some big pots. I had this with another kit the other day. These are guitar amp worthy almost. They're not the smaller pots you usually get in eurorack stuff. So here's all the ICs and the IC sockets. I'm going to put this in its own bin. One header. I'm going to dump the rest of this stuff out. Let's see what we've got. Oh, I think these may be illuminated switches, push button switches, even though they don't seem to latch. But we'll figure that out. And again, something someone who builds a lot of kits really appreciates. The washers and panel nuts for the jacks have already been removed. Thank you, because that's a big pain in the various areas when you have to spend 5 minutes taking all the nuts off. This is interesting. Okay, they are all the same jack manufacturer. One of the IC sockets came out. I'm just checking the legs, and here's another one that came out of the sponge packaging. And those legs seem to be straight, so that's good. So that's all the big mechanical stuff. I'm assuming that this bag is going to have all the other passive components, the resistors, the capacitors, and so on. It's taped and stapled, just to be sure. Oh golly. Do I have another pin here? Yeah, I do. Look in there. Looks like a spider nest of parts. This is the other end of the continuum. You've got SynthCube, which puts every single individual component in its own little plastic Ziploc bag, which, as you know, I consider a huge waste. And this is the exact opposite, where you would put every single component all in one bag. I kind of like this, so I'm happy. The only thing will be to dig out all the resistors. That's a big voltage regulator. And some good size electrolytics. I'm gonna get another flat parts tray. In fact, I will get one like magic. Ooh, magic! And lay these passive components out just so I can separate them into types. So that's what's in the kit. Again, without the build guide, you can still do it because all the componentry is marked by value on the circuit board, but having the guide, we'll follow the guide and go in guide order, and the guide includes the troubleshooting information and testing and calibration, which is critical. So I'm going to turn the cameras off now. I'm going to sort through these parts so they're not all in one big glob, so we can so you don't have to watch me trying to pick through to find resistors. And I'm also going to grab the, or bring the bit, I think this build guide is also on their website, so I will bring that up on the iPad because I can read that a little bit easier. We're all sorted, and now we're going to start putting it together with our favorite resistor time. And again, we're going to be following the build guide. There is no build guide online. It looks like they're not, they're fading this product out. They're not selling the pre-built unit anymore. They're only selling the kit, and there's no build guide. Now, one thing I will say, I am going against the build guide right from the very start because, as you saw, I split the two halves of the circuit board apart. The author of the build guide doesn't split the circuit boards apart until way late in step 7. I disagree with that. I've run into this in a couple of other kits over the decades. I see no reason not to split the boards before you start assembly. In fact, I believe splitting the boards before you start assembly is safer and less error prone. Once you've started mounting components on the board and then you go to split, even if it's scored really well so it splits really easily like this one did, you're putting pressure on components, it's just, in my opinion, a bad idea. So I split the boards before I start assembly. That's just a philosophical difference that I think is, for me, is based in fact, that it's more error-prone to do it the other way. But doesn't matter. We're just going to do all the resistors first. And as you know, if you've watched other videos, resistor time, I play back in fast motion and cut out some parts of it because there's very little to be learned or shared from mounting resistors and diodes on the board. And while you're watching a speeded up version with some things cut out, I will be building this listening to the WQXR app from WQXR FM out of New York City. They are what I consider the best classical music station in the world, and I've been listening to a lot over many decades, and I grew up with WQXR. And tonight we're going to start off with Rimsky-Korsakov's Symphony No. 1 in E minor. So that sounds like an audio treat. So enjoy watching fast motion resistor time. So that's resistor and diode time for this board. After resistor time, it's now IC socket time. Socket time is almost as interesting as resistor time because I'm just soldering a whole bunch of connections. But I do want to highlight again some techniques. So let's take this, first we'll check the pins, take this larger socket, put it on the board, and I will grab a pair of locking tweezers, put it like so. Socket's not going anywhere. You can solder to your heart's content without having to worry about the socket slipping, it not being flat on the board and all that. I strongly recommend you get a variety of tweezers and put them in on your workbench. You'll find they come in handy in numerous ways. I did a short video on the tweezers I use. I'll link it in the description below, and you can take a look at that if you'd like. Now you take the locking tweezers off and can solder the rest of the pins, but I'm going to put all the sockets on the board before I solder the majority of the pins. So again, we'll go back into fast replay because you don't need to see me soldering 100 or so pins. And I will go back to listening to Schubert's Mass in G. Sockets are all mounted on both boards. Now we're going to do the resistor arrays. These are, where did I put them? Here they are, they're in this bowl. These are resistor packages, a bunch of resistors all encapsulated in one unit. And let's see, there is a note on placement here. The 1 meg bus array on the top board must go with the dotted pin in the square hole. So that's the 6A105G. Let's see, we may have that, we may have another one. I should sort these. Why don't I sort these while I'm looking at them? 6A105G. 6A105G. So this needs to be handled slightly differently because the dot location matters. So we're putting the dot over the square pin, or the square hole. So we've got a part, these parts are a different part number than anything shown. These are 6X-2-105 LFs. And I'm going to assume they're the 1 megs, since the part number for the 1 megs is 6B105G, so the 105 is the value. 10 with 5 zeros, so that's 1 meg. And it's surprising that it's so significantly different. The part number is, I'm gonna go with this being the same as that part number, since they are the same resistive value. It's just a different part. My suitable substitute, as we would say, putting together airplanes. So let's see where I am. I've got the 10Ks, which are the 103s that are right there. That's all those. These are the 1 megs. It'll go in there. And these are 224, so that's 220K. Okay, so we've got all the parts. It's just this one, these threw me for a loop because the part number is so different. Alright, all the resistor arrays are done. Now we're going to do the voltage regulators. There are 2. There's the big honking one, and there's the smaller one. So we'll get the big honking one down first. Now, as you can see by the stenciling, silk screening, whatever you want to call it, this will lay flat. So I'm going to get an idea of how deep the pins have to be so it lays flat without a problem. And I'm actually going to make a little bitty mark here with my Sharpie so I can see where I should bend, and I'm going to drop it through, and then I'm going to bend it before I solder it just to make sure I've got all the play in it that I want. There, that looks perfect. And time for the locking tweezers again. Okay, now we're going to do the male headers. On this board, all the pin headers go on the top. And on this board, which contains the pots and switches, okay, the female headers on the control board will go on the back. Again, these go here, 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 that's the power one, here, 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 here. So again, it's nothing particularly unusual in soldering pin headers on, so I will be accelerating the cameras again. All the male pin headers are on. Now it's time for the capacitors and the ferrite bead. 27 capacitors and the ferrite bead. And that'll be a ton of fun. Again, we've got these are the 104s, these are the 103s, that's the ferrite bead, and that's the electrolytic. 1/10 of microfarad and 100th of a microfarad. So, nothing particularly interesting about this either. All the disc caps are on. Let's see what we want to do now. And we want to do the electrolytics now. There's only a few of them. And while we're in here, we'll put the ferrite bead on, I forget where that goes. Yeah. It looks like I'm going to have to stand this one up. I've said in other videos, I'm not a huge fan of stand-up resistors or stand-up ferrites. And I'll mention it again here. The reason why I don't like stand-up resistors or stand-up ferrite beads is because they can be pushed over, potentially grounding or shorting the leads. In this case, if this gets pushed over by, say, mishandling the power connector right here, this lead is not going to hit anything to short it out, but it's the principle of the thing. Now this is step 7. This is the point at which the kit author says to snap the boards apart. Again, I disagree with that. I think at this point you've got enough stuff on here that if you need any more than ordinary force to snap it off, your thumbs are a problem, could potentially be a problem. So that's a philosophical disagreement I have. Now, what he recommends now is kind of interesting. Is we're going to put all these female pin headers on so the boards can go together like that eventually. And the way he suggests doing it, which I have not done before, but I'll certainly give it a try, is to get all the pins through. I may have fouled that one with a little extra solder. Yeah, I think I did. Let me clean that up a little bit. What he recommends is you take the other board and without soldering the female pins, the female pin headers, you just join everything up like you will be doing on final assembly, like so, and that makes sure everything is absolutely aligned, and then you can solder the pins. It seems like a good idea. I had not thought of this before. It wouldn't work on all boards, of course, because this happens to be symmetrical and have enough positions on both sides to make it level. So you can do this without having a particular challenge with it. But in this case, it seems to be working out just fine. So I'm going to solder all these pins up, and that will, of course, take a little while. And so we'll be going into fast playback, and I'll be listening to Mozart's Sinfonia Concerto in E flat. Now, the one drawback to this is you have to make sure everything actually went flat. Everything has, but you might have seen me hesitate before I pinned any of those legs, and that's because you may be able to see right here this pin header is not flat against the board. So, and I could see that because the pins weren't protruding far enough, so I'm going to push that down with that screwdriver, and now they're in the right place. So just one thing you have to be careful of if you use this technique. You still have to double check that the pin headers are flat, or else it won't fit as well later on. That was quick. So pin headers are all on. Okay, now we're going to start putting the pots on the pot and control board, pot switches and so on. So one thing we do have to do, which is certainly not unusual, is to break the tabs off the pots, the aligning tabs off the pots, but these pots don't have aligning tabs. So I can skip that step. One panel nut on each jack, oops, and we're going to throw potentiometers around, and we're going to put 2 washers on the potentiometers. Now we're ready to start putting the mechanical bits on the board. A couple of things to mention. First, I couldn't put 2 washers on here because there's only 4 washers in the kit, so we put 1 washer on each. Second is these switches are polarity sensitive, and on 4 of them, one of the tabs at the base of the switch is colored black. As you can see, there's a silver tab on this side, and then on this side it's been blacked out with a Sharpie or something similar. On these it's a little more challenging because these have a yellowish orange tinge to them that is actually kind of hard to see. He may want to think about using another color, or maybe a dark green or something or blue would work better. I'm going to move these to the side for the moment. And first thing we're going to do is put the jacks in the PCB. Now we're going to put the pots on. They're all 10K, so doesn't much matter. Now we're going to do the buttons. Again, a little bit of inconsistency here. Look closely at the 8 buttons. 4 are marked with the yellow mark and 4 are marked with black, which we already looked at. See the photo at left. The side with the black or yellow mark is the negative side. On the PCB, this side is marked with a minus sign as well as the name of the color that should go in that hole. So fine with that. There's plus and minus along all the switch points. But this says orange, great. This says white. 4 of them say white, 4 of them say orange. Obviously it's black, but I'm not gonna, I don't know why they differ, but I'm not gonna worry about it too much. So now we're going to put the LEDs in, and they go somewhere. There they go. So we're just going to do pretty much as normal for a board like this. Let me get my head around how it goes again. So we're going to nestle the board down on top of everything. This is not bad. I'm getting a little rocking though. I don't know why I'm getting rocking. Because the jacks are setting the height here. Because they're the highest component in this architecture, and even if I had 2 washers, even if he had supplied 2 washers for these pots, they wouldn't fill the gap in there. So, you know, I hope I can get some. Now we're going to put a nut on one pot up here. We got to be careful with that, because again, those, we will pull them up. Maybe that's what he wanted, which is why he wanted 2 washers in there, because that pulls the pots. If you do that, that pulls the pots up and pulls the back of them off the circuit board, so you don't have to put that insulation I put in there on. However, since I only have one washer, I don't get enough penetration of the contacts on the potentiometer through the holes, so I'm going to make them flush. That's an executive decision based on what I've got here. The other thing I don't really like here is I'm not getting many threads on this jack. As you can see, if I tighten this down to a firm finger tight, there's no threads sticking out above the nut. And that's generally not secure, and the reason why we're not getting anything like that is because we're using the nut on the other side as a spacer. So we've got a little bit of spacing issues here. Hold on, I'm going to go look for a washer that would be appropriate in here to pull the pots off the board a little bit. So I'm going to turn the cameras off while I dive into my collection of washers and see what I can come up with. So out of my box of washers, I grabbed some of these. They're really big around, but the diameter inside is good and the thickness is pretty good. So I've put one on one pot. So I'm going to drop the panel back on and see if I pull that pot up with the panel nut, if it does what I'm hoping, which pulls the pot off the circuit board but does not pull the pins out. Okay, so it's actually looking pretty good. Let me get a panel nut on here and run it down. Yeah, that looks fine. It gives me, there's pin point protruding, say that fast. There's contact pins protruding through the end, through the circuit board, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, use these. And I brought 8 of them over here, but I won't use 8. I'll just use 4 of them. Again, had there been 2 washers in the kit, I wouldn't have had to do that. The other thing he does not mention, that I think is important to mention, is there's a protective film on this panel. So before you decide to screw everything down in final positions, I'm just locking some things down for soldering, you're going to want to peel the protective plastic off the panel. Another thing that's important is you want to make sure that the switches all move well in their little cutouts. There's a lot of space around them, so I think you won't have a problem with that, but it's just something to consider. Okay, so we've got one jack down, and we'll put one pot down with it snugging up against the back of the panel with the 2 washers, and that does pull it clean off the board, so you don't have to worry about shorting. He's very, what he is suggesting at this point is these potentiometers have a detent in the center. See, it clicks in, and he wants you to make sure it lines up with the little caret mark on the silk screen, and you may have to take it apart, take the panel nut, shift the potentiometer a little bit. I'm not going to bother with that, as I've said a number of times. index marks on potentiometers are the bane of my existence. I never get them right. They're always a little bit off, or they're not in sync with each other. So I've come to peace with that, and I'm fine with it, so I'm not going to put the knobs on and test that. Now I'm going to inspect the back of the car, the back of the board, to make sure everything is soldered and all the solder joints look good, and they're not. I missed the potentiometers. See, that's why you do this. Because even the most careful, the most experienced, even though obviously I'm not the most experienced, but I'm very experienced, can forget some stuff or miss some stuff. So never hesitate to go back over your work. And also never hesitate to admit to it, because the more times you admit to yourself a mistake, the more likely it is that you'll pay attention to that area in the future, even more than you did in the past. Now again, I like to use an index card or something like that to go across the back, because that allows me to reveal solder joints kind of one row at a time, so I'm not overwhelmed trying to look at the whole board at once. So you can focus just on the row you're looking at. And I'm just looking for bad solder joints, or here's another one. One of the pin headers. I did not, well, actually this doesn't make any difference, since I think that's at the point where I realized that these pin headers don't do anything. So what's the point of wasting my time soldering them? But since I'm doing this for posterity, we'll solder them up. All the boards are done. I'm going to take the nuts off here, because again, this is a step that the kit author does not mention. I'm going to take the panel nuts I put on temporarily off, and I'm going to peel this protective film off. I'm not going to pull the board off. I don't need to do that, but I do need to pull this film off. So I'm going to be putting all the panel nuts on, and I'm going to turn the cameras off for that, because we know what panel nuts going on looks like. So we go to the next step, which again is putting the ICs in. Oh, and jumpers. One thing I didn't point out, there are 2 jumpers for this board. So where are my ICs? Here they are. So first we're going to do the bottom board. These are these 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They should be TL074s. Yeah. Let's do the jumpers. Where do the jumpers go? One of the do jumpers on the 3-pin header 5-volt select on the right side, int. So that goes right on these 2 pins on this pin header. Then we have the bipolar, the other jumper on the bipolar 3-pin header on the left side, on the 10-volt side. We do the final mating, no problem. and all fully mated. Let me put the ribbon cable on, red stripe on this side. I'm going to do it this way. Okay, so that's the way she looks. Front view, side view, back view, other side view, top view, and bottom view. And that's what we got. There's one adjustment. This trim pot is used to set the trigger threshold, which sets the minimum voltage for the ping and reset inputs. And what the author recommends is first you just figure out where halfway is, and that's about halfway. Now we'll power it up. Smoke check. Smoke check good. No fire, and we got some interesting lights. Obviously these switches are on. You can turn those off. Now let me do some pulse beats here. So that's tap tempo, and you can see the little LED flashing along with it. And I didn't turn the scope on, so we'll wait for the scope to wake itself up. And that's what we're getting on the scope. That seems like a nice regular saw wave. I certainly don't see any variations in the voltage. Let me try and go for a slower tap on this now. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So, easy to change that. So that's kind of neat. So we know it works. I'm going to swap it over to the other LFO that we've got running. And that one's going a lot faster. And when I turn it off, I want to see what the signal voltage does. Signal voltage drops to 0, which is good. Oh, let me do, I'm going to go back into the top one again. I'm going to mess with the slew a little bit. So that slew all the way to the far right. You can see how it drops the tail completely off. We go all the way far left, and it's a sharply attacking LFO. Look at that slope, though. That slope off is kind of funny. There, that's what I would like. Okay, so when you're fully counterclockwise, the descending voltage curves off very quickly, but if I come up about an eighth of a turn, then it's a nice straight descent line. So slew is very handy, and again it's got the detent in the center, so you don't have to guess, and you don't have to rely on the notches on the screen either. Sorry, I didn't have the camera on my clipped onto my jacket for that last segment, so the audio is probably a little stinky, but we're back now. So we're going to be using little MIDI keyboard, talking to Bafaco Midi Thing, which is going in to the ADAC Systems VCO. They're 701. I like it very much. And I'm going to have the LFO going into pulse width modulation attenuation. So without the LFO, it's off. The on light is not on. It sounds something like this. Now if I turn the LFO on, and it's at that rate, so you can see it directly. Obviously has a very clear effect. Let me bring up the volume, the intensity on that. Change the pulse width. Now let me change the tap tempo. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so that's a very slow, and we'll see what that sounds like. Now let's try and go fast. No, this rack doesn't suit itself for fast tapping. And there it is, back out again. Now the interesting thing, obviously, that one could choose to do is, let me get the mix back in here and get the sine wave in also. And now I'm going to use the second LFO to do the FM attenuation on that one. And this is not set to do anything, so let me give it a nice steady beat. Now we combine, I bring the pulse width modulation up again. So for some reason or other, there we go. So we've got the square wave doing that, and we've got the sine wave doing. I'm going to slow this one down. So as you can see, we've got different impacts. We've got the pulse width modulation, attenuation going at a different rate than the frequency modulation. So they're kind of back and forthing, which is kind of interesting. While we're in here, I may as well do something else. I'm gonna the heck am I gonna do? I'm gonna take the gate from there. Oh, no, that's not what I was doing. I'm gonna take the gate from the sequencer. This is a Division 6 mini seq. Let's turn both LFOs off. So that's what it sounds like without the LFOs. Interesting. What else can we do? Oh, let me try slewing this a little bit. Let me go back to my keyboard. And I'm going to take the, I'm going to leave the sine one in, and we'll slew it all the way this way, which is that very sharp slope with the curve out. That's interesting. You can hear how it curves out. Now that's a much more, that's the linear ramp there. And you can hear how it's just attacking immediately. It's not the modulation is happening instantly. Let's go back to the center for comparison. Now we'll go all slew it the other way with a long attack and a quick release. So there you have it. As I said, I'm not going to test ping because I don't have anything out here to do that with, or demo ping, and that simply allows you to set the LFO rate by a voltage of pulses of voltage at 2.5 volts nominal. You can adjust that, but that's the nominal. You can drop it way down if you have a very low voltage source that you want to pull an LFO rate from. And I didn't do reset, so. And slew also is controllable by CV. So that's it. That's the Quad Pingable LFO. That's the Quad Pingable LFO. I hope you heard that. I just realized I was holding the microphone in my hand. So I'm going to go over that again. We'll have a little cut there. So that's the Quad Pingable LFO. The ping allows you to send 2.5 volts in a ping, 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 ping to set the rate of the LFO. That can go all the way down to, I think he said, about 1 volts for very low output signals that you want to sync your LFO to. Reset, I'm not going to try that. You can adjust slew with CV there. It's a little big for an LFO if you thought about it simply as one LFO, but since it is 4, I think it justifies its width. It works very well. Again, the oscilloscope traces were very clean. The only thing that's interesting is that, and I'm going to, while I'm sitting here, I'm going to plug the, while I'm sitting here, I'm going to plug the output of the number 2 LFO in, and I'm going to see what the slew looks like at the minimum there. Wow. So that's the waveform of the second LFO, and let me widen it a little bit. And if you look at what happens when I do slew, I'm turning it counterclockwise, and again the attack is straightening up, and then we get into that curved fall off. But then look at this. All the way to the left on that one is just straight up and down. And all the way to the right is not. While we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and try the other ones. So this is a number 3. Wow. I'm going to slow this down a little bit. I don't know if you're seeing this as clearly as I am, but the waveform has is not as sharp. It's a little curve in the slopes, and look at the peak is rounded. That's interesting. And there, that's all the way left on that one, and all the way right on that one. And look, it's all swoopy. Huh. Let me try number 4, see what that does. It's on, and by the way, when I turned it on, the green LED came on, so. Let me set this up a little faster. Okay. All the way to the left does that same kind of thing. But this one has the same sharp curves you would expect. I mean, same sharp voltage ramps that you would expect. So that's it. It's a good unit. I think it's got a lot of utility. Again, it's big, but I think it's got a lot of value for the width it takes up. The build was relatively straightforward. You heard any comments I had along the way. There's no surface mount, so it's straightforward. And I think this would be a good addition to anyone's rack, particularly a studio rack, a recording studio rack. This could be great, which is where I'm going to put it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Looking forward to the next one.